Welcome back. Today it is a more dramatic episode of the news because the developers of the extremely popular Tarkov are, definitely at odds with a lot of their community right now. So yes, it's one of those things. The developers have a vision for their game and they would like to carefully build out their world and deliver their vision to the players. And that can be quite tricky whenever data mining goes on. And this is something that's actually quite close to my own heart, I can actually say, because in covering World of Warcraft for years and years and years, in a way, data mining has kept a lot of that community alive, because it's like, oh man, we need something to talk about. But obviously then, it creates a situation where new plot points, things like that, always come out early. Now, the good thing that Blizzard have got going on lately is they're encrypting a lot more stuff in their builds. So if they really do want a narrative surprise, that is actually something they can ensure. For Tarkov, though, not necessarily the case, and that is what leads us to a statement that they made. And this is a statement that definitely riled up quite a lot of their community. They came out swinging, saying that data mining is illegal. One thing you should know, though, if you take a look at our note here, worth remembering that they are not from an English language first country. So, you know, that could be too strong of an intent whenever you translate it directly, I suppose. But the claim basically is that data mining is illegal infiltration of the in-game code and databases in order to extract information that is intentionally hidden from users. And that in particular, this does breach the end user license agreement of the game. That it, they say, removes the wow effect from the game, as well as making it predictable, and that does not align with their vision. And certainly, yeah, if you were working on an update and stuff got data mined and, you know, there goes your surprise, you'd feel pretty pissed off about that. And you might say, well, why is your stuff data mineable? The way that stuff works with development, it is not necessarily going to be feasible to, like, you know, lock away stuff and just, like, yank it out of a build. You know, specifically so the data mining can't happen. Code bases are complex, I imagine very much so for a game like Tarkov. Now, the thing is, they never actually say how this is an illegal practice. They just say that it breaks their EULA. So I'm thinking not necessarily illegal. Now, they do basically, the reason they feel it's illegal anyway is that number one, data mining is not a teaser for content for the game. Those are directly distributed from the developers. They're not leaked ahead of time by data miners. And the data mining is not supporting the game because it is basically acting, at the benefit of whoever the hell is doing the data mining. And then in particular, it hurts developers when all of the content of the patch is revealed day one instead of it trickling out as players find it. Yes, that is very much the case. Now, of course, you could take that another way, right? Where players engaging with that data mining, having content creators making videos about data mining, speculating on what's next, that actually drives massive social reach. And certainly if somebody is not playing the game, if there is regular news and data mining, then that means people can not play the game, but can keep up with the game. And that, in a way, keeps like Tarkov, in the mind share of people who otherwise would be less likely to be retained players. So you can certainly argue from both sides, like the pros and the cons. There are certainly games that treat this very hardcore, like say Final Fantasy XIV, where like they will do a lot to try to ensure data mining does not happen. And if there are leaks from the team, they will like come down on that with an absolute ton of bricks. Now, this is actually, as it applies to Tarkov, particularly relevant, because the big thing is the mention of intentionally hidden in their statement. They're very, very big in the idea that people should find things out for themselves when they're playing the game. Now, this is an interesting thing because the way the game is designed is to have a sort of oblique structure behind events and missions. It's the sort of thing where, if you're experiencing the magic trick, if you're experiencing the design as intended, you're not exactly supposed to know how all of it works. And if you just find out in a very clear set of steps or whatever via data mining, then yes, it does spoil the magic trick. And that means, sort of spoils part of the experience of Tarkov as the developers see it. Because I imagine for the developers, Tarkov is very explorative in how the players actually discover that kind of thing for themselves. Whereas if the players themselves are far more goal and reward driven, then they maybe will have a higher utility in that data mining because they actually don't think they care about the mystery, they just want to optimize. And this is always one of the problems that happens in games, one of the natural points of tension between a developer who's trying to craft an experience and a player who enjoys that experience, but maybe isn't motivated exactly in the way that the developer would want. So, when they basically run a new build in a test server or they introduce something into the full game, their intent is that it takes players a while to actually figure out how the locations and the quest and all of that stuff actually work together, and this is all within the framework of you exploring a map under the tension of course, having to fight both the environment and other players. The core of the extraction shooter. And you can really see where the game's lack of handholding just ups the tension of two players, you know, who are kind of like at odds or can be at odds, who are both trying to like solve the same mission. And this is the kind of, you know, zero handholding or low handholding gameplay that I think people love in something like FromSoft. So you think about data mining of a FromSoft game, and I think a lot of people who love Elden Ring, they wouldn't actually want that. I mean, if there was shreds of, oh, this is what the new DLC is about, yes, they'd be excited. But even with that, a lot of people would not want to know because they do not want spoilers, because for them, like, an item's flavor text or even the presence of an item can be a fairly major spoiler. And that is why in the statement, they suggest that players essentially engage with the official wiki to find out information that may not be in the game. And the reason why they say that is that information there is compiled by players after playing the game, and therefore, if you're at least getting something from the wiki, that is based off player experience, not data mining and that sort of like unfair advantage. That said, they're clearly aware that the wiki isn't something that's like updated enough for it to be a truly useful resource in that way. But anyway, the point here is they would like data miners to stop, and they're not asking here. They are demanding, they are threatening, they are warning of account bans against people who are involved in data mining or are even sharing data that originates from data mining. And that is the core bit, because it means that a content creator who is sharing data mining as a piece of content can get their account banned. Now that is the interesting thing, because that is what really could stop the viral spread of this information. Yes, if something's being talked about on like Reddit or something like that, that stays within Reddit. But whenever people go and they yank that from Reddit and they show it to a few 100,000 people, now the scale has just truly changed. Mega quick self-promo, we're also a game studio. Our latest game, our first game, debut game, The Pale Beyond, which currently is floating at a 91% on Steam. It is on sale right now for 20% off. If you think that stories of, like, say, Shackleton, if you think those are bloody awesome and fascinating, or, I mean, maybe the story of the Terror and the Erebus, well, I think you're really going to like what we've got going on. Yes, inspired by the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, we did indeed make a narrative survival role-playing game. Lots of characters, lots of decisions, you know, managing your resources, seeing how you can keep everything together, and believe me, a lot of people can die by the end. I actually do recommend, like, look, if someone dies, try not to save scum, because it will be a better, more rewarding experience, because whenever bad things happen, one of the things that, like, took a lot of time in, like, writing and narrative design is making sure that those bad things happening are actually interestingly paid off for the player. So I cannot highly recommend, like, almost playing it with a sort of Iron Man mentality, because if you do, like, yeah, thumbs up. Anyway, 20% off on Steam, link down below. Let's go. As for the player response then, this is not something that is going down well. And the thing is, a lot of people feel that the data miners and the content creators are punished for doing their job, and that's because they are really providing a role in the content ecosystem. You know, and that is something that players actively participate in and enjoy, and it's a part of their extended Tarkov experience. So yes, this will come off as an assault against that wider experience. And then, as much as it's all good for the Tarkov developers to have their own goals, and, you know, there is that friction in the quest design, some players literally may not want that, and some players may feel like the Tarkov devs don't always hit their own goals in a way that is satisfying, and therefore the data mining provides those players with a clarity that allows them to enjoy that game more than perhaps the raw intended experience. It's something the World of Warcraft developers talk about quite a bit, actually. They call it Game 1 versus Game 2, where the thing that they have the most control over is Game 1. That's like the game that they're actually making in their own design intent. But then for them, Game 2 is that other thing, where what happens when, say, a class is really useful because of its utility, but doesn't do great damage. Or maybe there's something like the ability Power Infusion from priests. A priest can basically give somebody a really big haste buff, and a lot of high-end players hate that because it means whenever people are looking at DPS parses that the person who had Power Infusion, it's like, oh, your parse doesn't count, you had PI. It's not real. So they don't like PI. But for the World of Warcraft developers, the idea that somebody can buff one of their allies and that they can coordinate with that ally to use that buff at the specific moment of time where it will be the most beneficial, that's good gameplay. Now, I find Game 1, the thing that the WoW devs actually want to make, more interesting than Game 2. I don't really care about that big whole, dick measuring contest. I think it's pretty cool that for one of my buddies, he's got an ability that synergizes really well with the additional haste, so whenever he uses that ability, I give him the buff. I feel like I've been a useful member of the team, and then the game is really good. That is the whole Game 1 versus Game 2 thing encapsulated, and it's absolute nightmare for live games where it's actually very easy for you to kind of lose control of part of your game from underneath you. Where, like, for a lot of players, do they want to just run the same thing again and again and again, using resources to complete the quest? Or would they have a smoother experience if they actually knew, this is what I have to do. When I go into that map, I know what I have to do. For me, I have to accomplish that. And that is a fun challenge because Tarkov is a really fun game and it's bloody intense. That's still a fun experience. It's not the one the developers intended, even though it still is providing that super intense gameplay. I think it's for a player, as much as in their head, maybe they can see, oh, it would be fun if I figured it out for myself over hours, but they're going to be like, I just don't have the time and resources, so I can't. But where this gets a bit turbocharged is the personal angle, because right now we've been talking about ideas and things, but it's as soon as the personal angle comes in that it can get turbocharged. So they've treated one streamer who does data mining content in a fairly interesting way, because all this seems to have kicked off when a streamer, Logical Solutions, so not just a streamer, they're also a contributor to the wiki and a Tarkov data miner. They were banned and then quickly unbanned from the game. Then the studio head specifically called the person out as a problem in sort of like a microcosm of this entire scenario. Now, what essentially had happened is this streamer was trying to solicit information from people who were on a NDA'd test server for a future update to Tarkov. So, because that's NDA'd, obviously the game company does not want that information to come out ahead. Here Nikita says, it goes beyond all limits. What should I do with him? And here we have Logical Solutions. If anybody has ETS access and wants to stay anonymous, blah, 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 let me know. And then, middle finger up to the rat in here reporting things to the company. So Nikita points that out. He's obviously not happy with this. Logical Solutions then go straight to him on Twitter. You could respond to one of my emails, Reddit messages, or Telegram messages, and we could have a conversation like I've been trying to have with you and the team for over 2 years. I have no issues with you or the game at all, just the rat-type people in my Discord. So it's kind of interesting. From his point of view, he can just be like, I am the journalist! I'm trying to get the scoop. Yes, we maybe naturally will not have the same goals and everything that we do, game developer, because I'm trying to get the scoop. Then for the game developer, they're just like, well, I don't want you to have the scoop. That's my scoop. We're the developers. This is important information, and it should come out properly the way that we want it to, because that's our plan. So that spat happened, I suppose. Now, the thing, though, is he is encouraging people to break an NDA that they've had with the game. So it's very easy, like that could be against an end user license agreement is like fairly noticeable. And it's like, if you are in a test server for a game and you signed an NDA and then you break that NDA, don't feel surprised when your account is banned. I think we all know that's reasonable, purely because it's like, you said you wouldn't, then you did. The idea, though, of incitement to break NDA, like specifically soliciting that, likely then with the goal of creating, content, whatever, personal gain, etc. out of that, I think that is where the developers themselves will probably actually feel quite pissed. But of course, this is a situation where you have got member of community like 42,000 followers. You can see that, you know, this tweet, like 1.4 thousand likes, which is quite a few, at least as of the time of right now. And yeah, this has driven a bit of a wedge between them and the players. I don't think this is going to lead to anything particularly massive. It's just an interesting microcosm of what goes on in gaming. There are some developers that, I don't want to say that the WoW team embraces data mining because they specifically disable it by encrypting content sometimes, but I think they are aware that, you know, you can't keep everything up. And that in itself can be quite interesting because there are many times where the World of Warcraft development team maybe gets something wrong. You know, I remember with patch 8.1, they really fucked up the lore, and it was actually data mining and the public test realm that led to player feedback that changed that. So sometimes, you know, if the data that's being mined actually would be bad for the game, there are instances where this can allow a developer to, you know, sidestep a problem. Now, they would, of course, say that, well, hey, we have people on a private test server. They should be able to do that. But sometimes, you know, quantity of feedback. I think it's a pretty interesting issue, to be honest. Just that way of like, yeah, when you release a game, you've got to be ready for the idea that somebody can crack open your EXE, or, you know, crack open your game files and rummage about. Funky thing for developers to contend with, really. I think ultimately, though, it's just about fostering a Dark Souls-like environment if that's what you want, where people actually value seeing it in-game and they don't want to be spoiled. Because if people want to be spoiled via data mining, often that means there is a wider issue that you should probably think about. Because, like, why is that? There will always just be sheer curiosity, but besides that, is there any other player need that the game is maybe falling short of? And that is why they actually really want and value that data mined information. Anyway, there you go. That's the situation. Let me know what you think about this one. I actually do think it's, yeah, pretty fascinating. And with that said, you can check out the video that will replace my face next. See you later.